Hey y'all, it's Natalie here for a cherry on top, and it's Tightening Tuesday in June, and we are using the gel press. So I have a bunch of stencils and even a few stamps, and so I think I've really got my process for gel press down. So I'm gonna give you what I needed to hear, and it very well could be that lots of videos say this and over, and I missed it, but I'm gonna tell you what I finally figured out the best way to do it, what works for me is that let your layers dry, okay? And I can tell you right now, this first layer is too much paint. I put too much paint on. You got to do really thin layers, preferably of thin paint, and then let it dry. So this is a love process of patience and yeah, you just got to let it dry, in my opinion, to get the best pulls. And that's kind of like what I wasn't doing right to begin with when I first started doing gel press. But I'm doing it now and it's working for me. Okay, so I'm letting it dry. What you can see me do is I lifted it up. I set it on the tray of my 6-tray tiered project cart from We Are Memory Keepers, and I'm letting it dry. And now I'm using that same stencil with all the beautiful leftover paint to rub onto a different page. And so it's not even a gel press print, but it actually is super beautiful, and I'm definitely going to use it. That would make a perfect card background. And I actually had to go find my spritzer because my little guy had stolen it, but I spritzed it again and rolled it again and got even a third impression off of it, basically. So that has dried, but you can see there's a little section under there, and I'm not happy with how it blended, and I don't really like it. So all I did was kind of rub it up with my finger and use a baby wipe to clear it up. And now I have a new blank space that I can fill in. So that's one thing that's nice to know. If you have a spot that you're not really loving, like, wipe it up. You can fix it. So now I'm using a flower stamp in acrylic paint, which you do have to be careful to clean your stamp really well when you're done with this. But honestly, this isn't a stamp that I often use anyway, and I will clean it well. But I liked the impression that it was giving. It wasn't perfect, but it gave a nice one. Now I'm going to go back in with this Farmhouse Stencil by Echo Park, and I'm going to mix orange and red just to kind of give me another color. I have a bunch of, like, a rainbow of colors over there, but I kind of wanted something a little off, not like a primary or a true secondary. So you'll see me use that one square, like, grid stamp a lot. That one is from Wild Whisper, and it's one of my favorites, especially for doing gel press. Again, I let the layer dry. You're not able to see really because I'm definitely letting them dry off camera, but I did let it dry because, like I said, that is how I have found to get the best pulls. So now I'm using white acrylic, watered down, and I'm trying to make some white splatters. This was a fun experiment. I'm not exactly sure that it worked. We can look at the final photos together, but I like the way it looks on there. Again, I let them dry. Now I did go find another, like, brighter pink color, and just going to add that through this Vicky Boutin Octacon stencil. So this is a super vibrant, really bright gel press pull on this. And this was just playing around. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do with this. And later we're going to do a pull that I kind of intentionally went into it thinking of a scrapbook process. So you can see I'm showing you it is dry. It is completely dry. I'm touching it. It's dry. So it's time to pull it up. So I get my paper ready and handy right there because I want to be quick. And I will say I didn't put enough white paint. So that is my second tip is, and you'll see in the later pulls I do more. But do white paint and then put your paper down while the white paint is still wet, and then it will help you to pull up everything. And so I'm using my brayer to really stick it down. I'm going to use my hands as well. I kind of like test the edge to see if it's coming up really well, and I want it to come up even more. So I'm really pushing it down all over the plate, rubbing really hard. And it still leaves quite a bit on the plate, but it does pull up a lot of coolness too. Look at that. I love the rainbow, the warm rainbow of colors there. I love the distressed look. You know, that's something that I super go for. And I love the pink over there with the grid. So now I'm going to do my second pull, and I almost always love my second pull better. And so I'm going to add in a new color. So you can see I was staying in a warm color palette, and I find that that's very easy to make sure to you have like something you like at the end. But I did go a little crazy here, and I went in with the turquoise. Since I mostly just had pale pink left, I thought those colors would go well together. And I just kind of did that one stencil all over the page, and I let it dry. I know that probably other videos that I have watched to learn to do gel press have told me this, but it never sunk in. And so I want to make sure to repeat it to you a million times. Let the layers dry. That works best. Except this last layer, which is the pull layer. And you can see I did directly onto the mat that time, and I immediately put my paper down, and I made sure to put lots of it. And it pulls up really nicely this time because I added enough white paint and I set it down immediately as soon as it was still wet. The other time that I added the white paint, it was almost a little bit dry because it was such a thin layer. So that's why I said add more white paint. Or you could do black paint or whatever color paint. You really could do any color paint to do your final pull. Just do like a full solid layer and make sure it's still wet when you're pulling it up. So it's still left some on the page, but look how cool that looks. I love that turquoise in with all those warm colors. I'm super happy with that, and I will definitely be using it for something. Now, I'm not exactly sure if that's just white paint or if it pulled off some of the paper. I couldn't tell. And I even like inspected it. You can see I'm kind of messing with it. And a lot of times you'll see people do gel press videos where they don't clean their gel press. But again, like I said, I wasn't sure if some of that might have been a little bit of paper. So I decided to clean it off with a baby wipe, and I actually flipped it as well, because I didn't want to wait for it to dry. So I'm going to start with some cool colors now, and I'm going more intentionally into this pull. So my intention is that I want to create an 8.5 by 11 pull that will be used for a grid design layout on a scrapbooking page. So I'm intentionally going in thinking I'm going to create 4 grids that I'm going to cut apart and use as a grid. So I'm just kind of playing around with this cross stencil. I'm using it both ways. Use it as a mask, used it as a stencil. And then I go in with this periwinkle color on this Tim Holtz like broken window stencil. And I have a little bit too much paint there, so that's something to think about. But I do go in and wipe some of it up or dab some of it up with a baby wipe or a paper towel. You can also use that. And it gives you fun texture, but it also just ensures that you don't have puddles of paint that you're waiting to dry, because what are we doing between each layer? We're drying it. I know it doesn't look like I did, but I did. I'm just editing the drying part out. So I spilled the paint. So obviously that was way too much paint because I spilled the paint on the stencil. So this is a very vibrant green. So I just do some Vicki Boutin stars through on a couple places, and I dry them. Now, I'm drying them with my heat gun. First of all, don't leave your heat gun in one spot for too long. It will ruin your gel press, but I'm just moving it around ever so lightly. I will say that some of my paint was a little peely, and I think that might be because I was impatient and I used my heat gun. However, it worked, and I don't mind the peely paint. I think it gives a cool texture. So now I'm going through with some Distress ink and using a little grid stamp that I have, and I'm adding texture around the edges because, again, I am intentionally creating this piece to be cut into 4 grids for a scrapbook page. The video turned out kind of long, so I don't have the scrapbook portion of the process on here. You can go over to my channel to see how the page came together, but you will get to see the final pull. But I just can put a 20 or 25 minute video out there today. That wasn't going to work out. So just going back in with some more blues through the grid stencil. And this is almost going to be like a full background because you'll see I roll it through and it ends up, you have the texture there, but it ends up being a pretty opaque covering with that blue paint, which is cool. It's fine. I like the color and it looks good, I think. But I am happy with how that is looking. And I am actually intentionally kind of blurring out a lot of the grid now that I see how it looks once I put it on there. So that's where you just get on here and you play around. If you really want to make sure you love it, I suggest staying in the same color family. That is one foolproof way to make sure that your pull is going to look good. You're not going to have any muddy colors. So here we go again with my intention. I am creating a grid, and I thought, wouldn't it be really cool to have the messy black edges of the grid, which I had already begun to create with the Distress ink and my stamping. So I just decided to visually create my grid by painting directly on with black paint. Again, I dried it, and now I'm doing my pool, my white pool. And we're almost done with this Technique Tuesday layout. I hope you've learned something. If anything, I hope you learned, let your layers dry. Let your acrylic paint dry on your gel press before you add more acrylic paint and before you've pulled the final. When you pull the final, do not let it dry. That white or black or whatever color you want to pull with, make sure you have added enough and that it is wet. And you see it pulled almost absolutely everything off that time. And I'm super thrilled with it. I'm going to dissect these grids and create a really gorgeous scrapbook page. You can find that process on my channel. But here are the final pulls from the gel press, and I'm super happy with how they look. Stick to a single color family. Let your layers dry in between applications, and on your final pull, make sure to use enough paint and let it stay wet to immediately apply to your paper and smooth it down with a lot of pressure to get a great pull. I hope those tips help you out. I'd love to see what you make with your gel press. Tag me, and make sure to check out cherryontop.com. Bye, y'all.